Hello and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be building a bookmarking app in React using the new React hooks. The app is very simple. You're going to create a link with a name. I'll call this link my cool link and I'll give it an address. Let's send this to github.com, and when we add it, it gets pushed onto the list. So stay tuned to see the code for this thing and learn a little bit more about React hooks. To start this project, I've already created a directory called React Bookmarks. I'll cd into that directory, and to be able to use any Node dependencies, I'm assuming you do have Node installed on your system, otherwise you should go do that. But to be able to install the packages from Node Package Manager, we'll have to initialize a package.json in our directory, and I'm adding the -y flag so that it just skips all the questions that they usually ask. After generating the package.json, we're going to install some dependencies. So for React, we need two dependencies. We need React and we need React DOM. React is the main dependency, and React DOM would be the library that helps with the rendering of our components in the browser. After installing React and React DOM, I'm going to install a package bundler called Parcel. So Parcel just helps package our project when we run npm run dev or npm run build. And to install this, you could either do npm install and -d parcel-bundler, and this will install it into the project itself, and then you'll be able to use the scripts to run the development and build environment of your project. But in my case, I'm going to install Parcel Bundler globally on my system, so that I can package any project that I build. And the command for that is npm install Parcel Bundler -g. The -g will install it globally. Now that Parcel has been installed, we're ready to start writing our awesome new React app. I'm going to open this project in my code editor. I use VS Code, but you could use any code editor you want. So to do that, I'm just going to clear my screen and simply type in the command code. This will open a code editor, and at the moment this project is bare. It only has the package.json, the package lock.json, and the node modules that we just installed. So I'm just going to increase the size a little bit so that it's easier to see on your screens. And we'll start off by creating an index.html file. And we won't really be writing anything in this index.html file, but it's necessary so that we can have a place to mount our React app. So we'll just create the base structure for index.html file, and I'll call this React hooks app, because the purpose of this video is to display as much information as possible on the React hooks, because it is quite new and you will need React version 16.8 and above, 8.1 and above, to be able to use React hooks. But they are currently shipping it with the default install of npm. So we'll just add a body tag as well, and in the body tag we'll create a div, and that div will give an ID of app. And we need to instantiate this div because we need a place to mount our React app. And then to finish it off, we're just going to create a script with the source of index.js. And this is where we'll write all of our React code. So let's go have a look at the index.js. First of all, I'm going to make this a full screen, and I'm going to create the index.js file in which we'll write all of our React code. And failed to load ESLint, that's fine. In this file, we'll import all of our React dependencies. So we'll import React from React, and we'll also import, let's not forget our semicolons, and we'll also import React DOM, which will help us with the rendering of our application in the browser. So let's do React DOM. Let's just save that for now. And this is where the bundler that we installed will be very useful. It's going to start with the index.html file, and it's going to see this script tag over here, and it's going to see that we are importing index.js. But index.js has these import statements that is basically importing the React code from our node modules. Without a bundler, this code won't really be readable in the browser. So we need a bundler to bundle up all of this JavaScript so that it just gets plugged into the index.html. The reason I like Parcel is because it's zero configuration, and for this size app that's okay, but later on when apps start getting bigger and there's more dependencies and there's settings and environment variables, etc., you might want to look at something like Webpack or Babel or any other transpilers and asset bundlers. But for this project, this should be okay. And just to get this app working, let's write our base code. And the normal way of writing React code is usually with classes. Not all components are classes, but usually when a component receives props and is a stateful component, it will be a class. Otherwise, they will write it as functions. But the reason hooks has been created, or part of the reason why hooks have been created, is to remove the need for classes. So we'll only work with functions when we use hooks, and as a matter of fact, hooks don't actually work inside classes, so the entire app will be made with functions. So a factory function would look something like a constant that has a name, and it is a function so this function is this app variable. So what we'll do is we'll just return for now a bit of JSX, which is part of the React syntax, and we'll just say div, and in there we'll say h1, and we'll say hello world, and save that. And to use our app, we'll have to create the render function. So we'll say React DOM dot render, and the first argument to this render function is the element in which we want to the element that we are rendering, and we want to render the app element, which is now a custom component, so we can write it in HTML syntax. And the second item is the div, or the element in which we want to render it. So let's say document.getElementById, and we want the app element that we created. Let's save that. So to run this code, I'm going to close down this and just open the integrated terminal. That's fine. And move this up a little bit, right clear. To be able to run this code, if you've installed Parcel Bundler, you only need to run Parcel and then the entry file in the directory. So we're currently in the React Bookmarks directory, which has the index.html, which will be our entry file. So let's run index.html and then let that run. So at the moment it's configuring port 1234, couldn't be used because I'm running another server on that, so it's using 62621. And let's open that and bring that over here, and you'll see hello world. So this is our React app displaying in the browser, and the way we can easily debug this or look at it is to open our console, and there is a Chrome extension and also a Firefox add-on, I think they call it, called React, and this allows us to view our React code, and it will give us nice little props, and it will show the state, and it will show stuff like that. So I really recommend installing the React browser extension if you want to debug your code. So I'll just leave that server running. and keep writing the code. The way I usually like doing this is I want to create the static website before splitting up my code into components. So I'll write my entire page code in the app variable and display that on the page. And then the elements that need to become components, I'll remove from the app variable and create new functions that return these things as components. And this will allow us to start using our state in cool ways and definitely have a look at these React hooks. So let's get started with creating the base static website. The first thing I want to do is import a component from React itself, and this component is called fragment. The reason I'm doing this is mostly semantic. Instead of adding these empty divs and just writing the code in there, I'll rather do it the React recommended way and create these fragment tags to place every component's code in, and this will wrap all our code inside the component. I'm just going to write the the HTML as I sort of imagine it to be on the page and structure it so that we can quickly style it with CSS. First of all, we want to create a nav element, and this nav element is going to have a logo, which will be a tag, and inside the a tag will be an image element. So let's just remove and close this off, and then the source of the image for now will just be a static React logo that I've downloaded, and I have the link over here. I'll just add that, and I'm going to wrap this code so that you can see what's going on. Don't be confused with the line breaks in the link. This isn't an actual line break, it's just the code being wrapped. The other elements in the nav bar, it won't be too much because we're not really navigating on this page, but we'll have an unordered list, and in the unordered list we'll have a list item, and this will just say home. We'll save that, and we won't give the UL a class, but we'll give the nav a class name of navigation, and we'll save that. Next up, now that we have our nav, we can minimize that and then start with our main code. And the main code, I'll give a semantic element called main. This will be the body of our page, and in there we'll have two divs, and each div will have a class name. The one will be the left content, and the other one, let's just add it now, div will be the right content, so that we just have a few CSS selectors to work with. And in the left content, what we want to do is we want to have that form and the logo displayed, and I'm going to structure the HTML in a way, or the JSX in a way, that makes it easy to style with display flex, because that is my favorite display property to use. So let's get started with the left content, and the left content will have an image on top. Don't have emit when I'm using JSX, but the image will have a self-closing tag, and it will have a source of that same link that we used, and that's it for the image. And then we'll have a form on the page, and this form we'll use to submit the new bookmark links that we want to save. So let's start with the title of the form. I'm going to make it an h2, and I'll give it a class name of form title, and I'll just call this add a bookmark. And below the title, we're going to add two input groups, and I want to put these input groups in a div so that we can style it with display flex. So we'll have two inputs, and each of these will have its own container, and then we'll have a button to submit this form. So in the top input group, I'm going to add a label, and this label is going to be for the let's call this the link title, because for each link we'll have a name and we'll have the actual link that it goes to, and the label will say enter a name for your bookmark, or let's just say enter a bookmark name to make it a little shorter. And the label will have a class as well, and this class will be, and remember in JSX we have to say class name and not just class, because this isn't actual HTML. This is being compiled and parsed by the React DOM library. So class name will be form label, so that we can style it in the CSS. I'm just going to add these attributes on their own line for sake of semantics, and then under the label we'll have an input, and the input will be a self-closing tag, and it'll have a type of text, and it will have a name and an ID, and it will also have a minimum length and a maximum length, and we'll put in a placeholder. And the reason I do this is just for a little bit of browser validation, so that, you know, we always have to think about that. Even though this is just an example app, I still like keeping up the practice of putting those values in there. So let's give it a name, and we have to name it the same as the label, and we'll call this the link title, and we'll give it a minimum length, and I think JSX, that's min length, equals title can't be shorter than 1, and a max length, title cannot be longer than 25 characters, so that our cards don't look ugly when the links are added. And then we'll just add some placeholder text to help the user have a better experience. We'll just say 25 characters max. And then for the next input group, we're basically going to repeat that. So I'm going to copy and paste that in here, and this time we'll have the link href instead of the link title, because this is the actual link itself. And this will be input text. Minimum length is, let's say, 7, because if we look at http // that's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 characters. So let's assume someone's using the HTTP protocol at minimum. And then for the max length, we won't set a max length because links can get pretty long, so let's just remove that. And we'll set a placeholder so that the user can see, sorry, there's already a placeholder attribute, but we can add an example link just so that the user can see the structure of the link itself, so that they aren't confused about it. And that will do it for our inputs. And for our button, we'll just create an add over here, and then we can move on to the write content. But before that, let's go have a look at what this currently looks like in the browser. Before our CSS has been added, we can see that this is pretty ugly. There's no styles applied at all, and we have nothing to look at. So let's just keep building the JSX and start styling it as soon as possible with CSS. For the write content, we basically only want the list of our cards that hold the information to our links. And for now, I'll just create a static card that has some static information in it. Let's start off by creating another div, and in this div we'll add another div which will be the holder of the image, and we don't need to put any content in there because it's basically just a placeholder div. And then the div below that will have the title of the link. So we'll just say let's give it a h2, and then in that h2 we'll give it a tag so that it actually goes somewhere. Href equals hashtag for now, and then in here we'll say my link, so that'll be the link's name, and the href will be where the hashtag is. For each link, I want the React logo to be in this div I created, so I'm going to apply some styles that in the React way with the curly braces, and then just give it a name, like link image style. And this requires us to create this variable, and I'll create it inside the app so that, or we'll just create it up here for now. We'll say, no, we'll create it in the component so that we keep it encapsulated. So let's say const link image style equals an object, and the way these work is with camel case, and also it requires apostrophes for the values of the properties. So we'll just set one property here, and we'll set the background image property, and we'll move this into a CSS file soon so that we don't need to set it this way. I just want to display the different ways of setting CSS for those who aren't as familiar with React. And we need to escape these two characters and then just add our favorite React logo in here. Save that, and that will be the majority of our markup. I think we can start styling this. First of all, I'm just going to open the File Explorer and add a main.css file. And in this main.css, I'll start off by resetting the body to remove the automatic margin that it has. And I'll set that to 0. And then I also want to set font families. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the font families from the React website that they use. I know some of these will have to be imported with Google fonts, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to copy that and paste that in there so that we can just use these. I'm not sure which ones come out of the box and which ones need actual imports, so I'll just leave them all there and just try and keep it as close as possible to the React website. Next up, we can start styling our markup. I'm going to start with the navigation. This is the nav bar that we created. I want it to be positioned at the top of the page, so I'm going to give it a position absolute. To position it at the top, we'll have to make top 0, and to make sure it spans the entire width, we'll give it some left and right properties as well. And then I like making my nav bars 56 pixels. I think it's something I inherited from Bootstrap. And then on each side of the nav bar, I want to create some padding, so top and bottom 0 and 5% on left and right. And I also want the background to be a bit darker than the content, so I'm going to give it a hashtag 333 background. And the navbar needs to have the items displayed in a flex form, so I'm going to give the entire navbar a display of flex, and I'll say align items center, because this will line it in the middle of the navbar from top to bottom. And we'll give it a justify content of space between. So this will separate our logo from our actual text content. So let's go have a look at that. And in order to look at that, we'll have to go to our index.js and import the CSS that we are using. Otherwise, the app won't know where the CSS is coming from. So we'll just do that and then go look at it in our browser. So let's open up the browser, refresh, and if it's not displayed, we could try resetting or restarting our application. Sometimes CSS imports won't affect our server's automatic restart. So let's just open up that, close this, terminate, yes, and then a little bit too fast there, do a rerun of parcel. I'm going to close that down, it'll run in the background, and then reopen the browser and refresh. Refresh again. And it seems like the port has changed. So let's just do a control and click on that one so that we can open the new page. And there we have it, the new app. And the reason it looks like this is because we need to style the image to have a specific height. I'll just do that directly on the actual image itself. So let's just go to our markup in index.js, find the image and we'll just say height. We'll make it smaller than the nav bar. We'll set that to 40 pixels. Save that, go back to the browser. And I have been setting the height on the wrong element. It took me a while to debug that, but let's just put that on the place where it belongs, and it's because I minimized it. So let's put the height at 40 pixels, and I don't believe we'll need this auto. Save that, and then have another look at that. And there we go. So we have our nice little React logo over there, the nav bar over there, which will style to look a little bit better, and then we'll start with the body. So let's jump into that. For the rest of this navigation, we're just going to style the link and the color of the text and the natural padding and list style. So to do that, I'm going to target the navigation UL, and I'll set a property called list style none, just to remove that dot off of the list item. And then I'm going to reset the padding to 0, and I'll also make the entire UL's color white, so that all the LIs will inherit the white color. And then on the list item that's inside the UL, I want to set a pseudo selector hover, and on hover I want the cursor to change to a pointer. This is only to make it seem like it's a link. This won't go anywhere because it's just a fake link. And then for the A tag, we'll have to set the image and the A tags properties separately. So I'll just do text decoration and then none to remove the underlined text. And the navigation's image, I guess there is no underline on the A text, but it's just a habit to set that, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. And for that image, I already set the height, so that's fine. We can just leave that image as it is, and then we can start moving on to the main section. What we want to do is we want to set the one half of the page should be the form, and the other half should be a scrollable section that will contain all the list items that are our cards. So let's jump into that. In order to separate the two sections, I'm just going to give the main section a display of flex so that we can set the flex basis properties on the two items. So we'll do a display flex, and I also need to set a margin top of 56 pixels because the nav bar is now positioned absolutely, the content slides under it. So I'm just going to slide the content down a little bit and then make sure that the content is the screen width. So this will look good on desktop. I'm not making it very responsive because the focus of this project is actually React hooks, but I want to take you through my markup and CSS as well, in case you want to build the app or build a similar app and extend some features. So let's make it 100 view height, and we have to set the calc property. So what this does is it'll allow you to do some math, and I'll do 100 view height minus 56 pixels because the nav bar is 56 pixels and we want the main section to move up the amount that we moved it down, and the 100 view height. So if we just save and look at that, we'll see that the main section should be, okay, let's just reset the size of this image here. Let's go back to the code and set the, I think let's just do the main, and then, or we can just do left content and then that image in there. We don't want to be that big, so let's do a width of 40% of its container, and I think at the moment that will be, let's have a look at it. Yeah, so that looks a bit better. Now there's no scroll on the body, and next up we want to set this to be exactly 50% and that to be exactly 50%. To do that, I'm going to actually just put this above here so that it makes chronological sense, and just do left content. And the easiest way again will be to do display flex on that left content, and just also do a flex basis of 50% to make sure that it takes up 50% of its parent. And now the children inside this left content will be flexed as well. And we want to make the flex direction column because we want the items to flex from top to bottom. So let's set the flex direction to column, and then align items in this case will align it horizontally because the flex flex direction is column. So let's do align item center to have it in the middle of the container, and we want to set the background color, and I just stole this background color from React page. I just used the color selector, and it's something like hashtag 282 C34. It's like a darker gray. And then the last thing we want to set is to make sure it fills the parent as well. So we'll just do calc, because 100% won't work in this case. We just have to set it to the exact same height as the parent. So we'll just do 100 view height minus 56 pixels again, and save that. Let's have a look at the browser. So that looks a little bit closer to what we need. And next up, we have to start with this form and then the right side. For the form, we have to start off with selecting it through the left content form, just to make it a bit more specific. And there's quite a lot of properties on the form. Again, we'll do a display flex so that we can flex those inputs and buttons and stuff. And then we want to give it a fixed width in this case, because we know that we only mean to display this on a browser that's like a window size, and do a margin top of 50 pixels, right of auto, bottom of 0, and left of auto, so that it's in the middle and it's a little bit away, has a bit of margin on the top. And then the background I want to make the same as the nav bar. So let's do background and then hashtag 333, just to reuse a little bit of the color and keep that consistency. And then I want to do some padding so that we can actually see, so that we have some space inside the form. And let's go up to the flex property, and let's just do a flex direction of column, because the form also displays its items from top to bottom. And we also want to set justify content with space around, so that everything has equal space around it, and that means on the outer edges and between them. And then I also want to give it a border radius of 10 pixels, because that just makes it look a little bit cleaner. And let's just add a box shadow for the sake of completeness. Usually 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 3 pixels, and I like using RGBA in this case. Let's do 0, 0, 0, and then 0.5. Save that. Let's have a look at the form. So it looks a little bit better. We should definitely change the text color and play with the spacing and the size and everything. So let's set a width on this. I think this looks a little bit too narrow. Let's do I think this shouldn't be 200 pixels. Let's do a 50% width rather. So that takes up 50% of the parent, and let's set a fixed height of 200 pixels, because we aren't scrolling the page, and that looks that will look better. Okay, yeah, so that looks a little bit better. Now we have to set these items to flex as well in column direction. So let's target those. The inputs are in a div, so I'm just going to do left content and then form, and then the div inside the form, which is the container for the input. So I'll give that a display of flex as well, and I'll set the flex direction to column again to make it flex from the top to the bottom. Flex direction to column. And then for the form title, if you look at like all these H elements, they always have like this extra padding at the margin at the top and bottom. So I'm just going to remove that, and now we can see the forms are, the inputs are stacked on top of each other. So for the form title, I'm just going to remove that margin that it has, that natural margin. I'm going to do left content and then form, and then for dot form title, and I'm going to set margin to 0, and that should fix the margin on the title. So next up, let's start styling the colors of the text and the labels and etc. So I'm gonna actually do color white on the title as well, just so that it's a bit more visually, like there's a contrast between the background and the text color. And then for the I'm going to do dot left content again and form, and I'll do dot what did I call it? I think it was form label or something like that. Form label, and the color will be white again. And in this case I could actually just use this. I think this will work as well. Just paste that in there so that we can just not rewrite that code. Save that, have a look at it. Yeah, that looks fine. And then next up we want to start styling the button inside the form, and I called that no, I'll just select it with button, and then I want to add a margin on top because it looked a little bit too close. I'll just do 1 em, and I'll do a padding of 5 pixel just to make it a little bit more have it a bit bigger with the text aligned in the center still. And then I'll add a border and a border radius, and I'll remove the natural border. So let's just do border none and add a border radius of 5 pixels should be enough. And I want to make the cursor pointer again just to give a visual representation that this is clickable. And I'm going to make the background the same color as the React's blue, the same blue that's in that logo. So I'm going to go 61 DA FB. So that's interesting because React is made by Facebook and this is FB. So anyway, the color of this button I want to have black because it just looks better on that light background. So let's have a look at what we have now. This looks better, but we still need to style these inputs. They look a little bit rowdy. So let's go back to the inputs, and I'll do this above the button. Left content, form, and then all the inputs in the form, and then we'll style that also with some padding just so that we can have some space to breathe in there. And we'll add a border radius, same as the button, so we want to keep that consistency on the border radius. I'll do the 5 pixels, and I'll do a border of none because there's a natural like inset border, and I'll do a margin top so that we have some space between the label of 0.2 em, very small margin. So let's have a look at that, and that looks pretty good. It looks much more visually appealing than the previous version. So I think we can start moving over to the right side. The right side has a class name of right content, and we'll start by just filling it into the parent. So we'll actually give this a background of that same blue that we had in the button. It's this FB color, and then we'll also fill the height the same way we did with the left side, which is the calculation of the 100 view heights minus the 56 pixels of the nav bar. And then we'll have to give this a flex basis of 50% so that it takes 50% of the width. And then the final, we have to give it a display flex as well so that the card items can display from top, flex from top to bottom, and we don't really have to care about positioning them. So let's do display flex, and then flex direction column, and then we want to align them center as well. This will horizontally align them because it's flex direction column. And then this has to be items, and then after that we want to set the overflow Y to be scroll, because the page has a fixed height, but we want this container to scroll. So what that will look like is this, when we have the scroll bar at the right side here now. So when we have more links than the size of the page, the entire page won't scroll, just the right side of the page, and that's a little bit more visually appealing to me. Let's start styling those bookmark links that we're going to save there, and I'm just going to select that with the right content, and I called it link cards, I believe. So the link card will have an image and the link and a specific background. So let's set the background to the same as the navbar, and we'll make sure that it takes up 60% of the width of the container, and we'll give it a display flex again, obviously. And the way we want to flex it is the image has to be on the left side and the text on the right side. So flex direction would be row, but its default value is row, so we don't have to set that. But we also want a margin top of 50 pixels, so that we just have some space between the cards and also the first card and the nav bar on top. And we want to align these items in the center of the container. And we also want to set a border radius to have a consistent round look to our elements on the page. So we'll just do 5 pixels again. And I also want that same box shadow that I have on the form itself. So we'll just do box shadow 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 3 pixels, and then that RGBA value. Save that, and now what will happen is these items will look okay, I think, if we just have a look at them. And that didn't work because I never added the classes to the link card. So I need to give this a class name of link card, and I need to give this a class name of link image or link card image. And for the link itself, I'm gonna do on the div, I'm gonna give a class name of link card link. So that's quite semantic. And then if we have a look at it in the browser, there we go. So it does look a little bit better, but we need to set the URL of this background because at the moment it's not working. So let's figure out why. So if we go have a look at the link card image, we do have the link image style on it, which is the background image, but we haven't given it any size or position or anything like that. So let's just go down here and make sure we add that quick. Let's do right content and then dot link card and dot link card. I guess I could just do link card image because I don't think I'll reuse that same name. So let's just do link card image, and then we'll have to set the properties for the background. So I'm going to do background size, and this should be cover, and then background position should be center, and the what else should I set on this? Let's have a look at that. Maybe this is already enough. Okay, clearly not. Let's inspect this to see what's going on. So, oh, there's no width or height on this. I think let's give it a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels too. There we go. This looks much better. So let's set those properties in the CSS. Let's go back to the code and just go height 100 pixels and width 100 pixels, and have a look at that. Refresh to make sure it added. Let's delete this, and yeah, that looks a bit better. Now we just need to style this link to make sure it is in the right position. So let's get to that. And I know this is quite long, the markup and CSS, but I wanted to keep it this way so that we can build the entire map. But if you, I will add a, or I did add a position in the description or comment that takes you to where we actually work with the hooks, if that's why you're here. But yeah, let's just keep going on with the styling. So I want to set the link, I think the link itself, the color and all those properties. So let's just do the link what's called right content and dot link card link, and then the a tag inside there, and I want to set that to color white, and I also want to set it to have a margin on the left side so that it just has a little bit of breathing space. And I think let's do margin left, and I think I'll do that 10 pixels would be fine for that. So let's have a look at that. That looks good. I think I like the underline on the link because it just makes it clear that this is an actual link. I think design wise that's fine, but we have one last problem before we finished with this, and that's if we have too many links. Let me show you what happens. Let's go back to the code and just copy and paste the link card a few times and save that. So if we go look at this, you'll see that they shrink. So that's because of display flex. We need to set a I think it's flex shrink property, something like that. So let's have a look at the code and try that. Let's go to the CSS, and that should be on the card itself. So that's this card. Let's set a flex shrink of 0, and now it should render properly. There we go. So when we scroll this side, the left side stays still, and to me that's quite nice. So what we want to do is we want to enter some details here and then push it on to the right side. So let's finally start using these hooks. So React Hooks has just been released, and I really want to sort of emphasize how what impact that has on our coding. So I'm gonna sort of compare it to the old way a little bit, and also explain some things that it does under the hood, or not does under the hood, but that's built into like the newer features of JavaScript or ECMAScript. And to some people this might seem intuitive, but I'm also kind of making this video for people that probably or likely don't know what is going on. So first of all, the old way of setting or creating state in a component, I just created this example JS file, but the old way would have been, so we create an example component and it's a class. So the class has a constructor, so this will extends react.component or something like that, and then in the class we'll have a constructor, and this constructor will bring in the props from the parent, and we'll have to super this props, and then each component has a few methods that come with it called component will mount, or I think component did update, yes. And these are lifecycle events or hooks, lifecycle events. And when the component mounts on the screen, this will happen, and every time it updates, this will happen. So usually what we'll do is we'll do something like we'll set the state of this component, and we'll say this.state equals an object, and then we'll say name equals my name Eckhart. So when component mounts, we want to, let's say, add a surname, and then we'll have to do this dot set state, and then add a new object and say, or let's do surname and then Drea. So we'll have to add this property, so it's empty when we instantiate it, but let's just say for some reason we want to set it when it mounts. So every time, this will only run once when the component is created, but every time it updates, now we have to make sure that we write more logic to update this when we want something to happen. And this creates a lot of like you have to start thinking about like, when does this happen, when will this happen, and in between those events, and do I need to update this, etc. But the new way of doing it with React hooks is we don't use classes anymore. We'll go into our app and we'll say something like const, and then in like an array syntax we'll say, I'll say card data, and the second one will be set card data. So that's that's just the way we have to write this. The first element in the array is a variable. That's name will be the variable of the state that will hold some initial value, and the second one is the method to update that. And to use this, we have to use a new thing called use effect that's provided by React, and we have to import that. use effect. I mean use. I think it's no, it's not use. Yeah, it's use state. It's not use effect. And use effect is another component or another method provided to us by React that we use in conjunction with use state, and that every time use state changes, then use effect will allow us to use that actual effect. But in this example, we won't use that. So we'll have to say use state and then set an initial state to card data. And whatever we set in this will be the initial state of card data. So let's make it an array with objects in it. And then we'll set something like link name and set that to my link. And we'll also set a second property called link href. And we'll set that to https. Let's just make it GitHub or something. github.com. And this will set the initial states. But if you don't understand what's going on with this syntax, let's have a look at array destructuring, because that is essentially what's happening. So usually we would set an array something like const my array equals, and then this will have like 1, or let's just make it numbers, 1, 2, and then 3. So array destructuring allows us to do something like const and then create the array like this, and for each item in the array we equal it to, we'll create a variable. So this variable would be 1, this variable would be 2, and this variable would be 3. So if we set that equal to my array, what will happen is that each of these elements will map to these newly created constants. So if we do something like console.log 1 at the moment, what will happen is it will log out 1, because 1 is the first element in this array and we set it equal to that array. So that's like a array destructuring concept. And with use state, when we say const let's say state and set state equals use state from React, and then let's just say the first value is 1. What this does under the hood, provided by React, it does a lot of things, but it should essentially return something like an array that's first item would be a 1. So the second element in the array would be a function provided by them. So we can just reuse this set state and not really care what they did with it. So that's what the power of this use state is, and why it works the way it works. It does more than that under the hood, like preserve the state, because it doesn't get garbage collected like a normal when you instantiate a variable in a function. Once that function is done, the variables all get destroyed. But in this case, React will maintain those variables, so the state will be available constantly. Another cool thing about these hooks is that we can set more than one. So we can do another one called new card. So when we create a card, we'll plug that into there, and then we'll set something like set new card, and this will be the method to change that new card data. And the initial state for this will just be a normal object, and we'll just set link, I think we call it link name, to null because we don't have a new one, and then we'll set the link href to empty string as well. So what this did in essence is we just created a new state in which this first instantiation will create a state object with the property card data, and the card data has an initial state of which is an array, and this array contains it contains all the objects that has the details of the cards. And the second instantiation is a new state item called new card, and we'll use this to update to send out a property to the child, because we're going to move this link card out to its own component and send down some props, which will be this entire array. So every time we click that button, we'll push up we'll momentarily save the input values in this new card object, and then once we click the button, we'll send this entire object and push it up into the card data, and then send that card data down to the child as a prop. So let's jump into that. To get this going, we'll have to start with our form, and I'm just gonna do this on submit equals and then the event parameter, and then prevent default, so that we don't post the data somewhere. So because we're going to handle this in its own function. And then next up, we'll have to bind these input values to the actual state. So what we'll do is we'll say the value of this input is equal to, and the old way of using state will be this dot state to get into that object and then something. But now we don't have a class, we have a function, and there's no, this value won't be the same. So we can just use new card. And the reason we use new card is because we want to momentarily save this value in there. So we can do new card dot link name to save that in there. And for the input, we can do value equals link card, a new card dot link name, link href, because this is where the link will go in. So now what's happening is every time we change the value of this input, and I think we can actually look at that in the browser. So if we inspect the code and we go to the React extension and we have a look at the where will we see this? I think if we look at directly the inputs of the form, so maybe we should look at the app, and then we have state. So here we go. Let's look at this input value. So this is the second input. Just scroll down a bit and have a look at this value over here. Oh, now at the moment what's happening is when I type, nothing is updating because we are setting this value equal to that value. So now we have to sort of bind the onChange event to update this, and that is when we'll use the React hooks to update the state. What we'll have to do is we'll have to add a event listener on change. So every time this thing changes, we'll set a new value. And to do this, we need to listen for the event, the change event, and then use that state item that we have in the array, the one called set new card, because this will allow us to change the state. And this is why we create this second item, so that we don't have to say this dot set state like we used to with the old React way. So now we define the name of what we have to declare to set this thing's state. So let's go back to the onChange event, and we'll use that set new card, and we have to provide it with some values. So we have to pass in that object first, the entire object that it is, and just update one item. And the way we're going to do that is with destructuring again. We'll do dot 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 and then the current value of new card, except change only link name to, oh, is this link href? Change only link href to e dot current target dot value. So let's save that. So what this destructuring is doing, it's destructuring this object, the new card object. So it's basically giving it all these properties with that. And then because this is the second thing, this will overwrite the current link href. And the reason we do that is because we can't just say only change this, because then it won't, the link title will be reset as well. So I do the object destructuring with new card, and then the second property on the object will be the changed value. So if we go look at the React DevTools now, inspect, and then go to that input, I think it's this one, and then if we look at that value and start typing, the value updates to the new value that we type in there. So we'll have to do the same with the other input. Let's go to this input, put that in there. So we want to set the new card, but we don't want to overwrite the href value. So if the href value has been edited, please put it in here, but you have to overwrite the link name. So that we're just using that destructuring syntax again. So if we save that, go have a look once more, inspect this, use the React Dev Tools, go to the input, the top input. If we have a look at this value over here, once I enter some data, it will change. So that allows us to hold those values and send them out to update the array of card items. So let's do that. The way I implemented the dispatching of the card to the new array is I actually created another method called dispatch card set. You can call it what you want, but I just found this to be what I felt like calling it at that moment. So what this is going to do is I'm going to return this I'm going to give it a function that returns the dispatch, because I actually want to invoke it with I'm going to call it dispatch card set, and I want to give it some arguments. So the function will accept some parameters, but if we don't add the function syntax, then this thing will immediately evoke, and we don't want that to happen. So what we want to do is we just want to send it the new card, and we want to make sure that by the time this button is clicked that there is some values in here. So we'll just do yeah, I think because we have the min length and max length and placeholder, I mean those things in there, this should validate whether this is empty or not. But maybe because we gave it a on submit prevent default, it maybe removed that. But let's just have a look. Let's save that, and we have to create this function or this method now because it doesn't exist yet. So right up here, I'm going to do it before the styles. I'm going to say const what do we call it, dispatch card set, and this accepts a payload, which is that new card event. We have to set that equal and give it the arrow, and then what we want to do is we want to take that payload and then push it up into that array. So the way I'm going to do is I'm first going to just give the old array a variable and say that it is the card data. So the card data we defined in the state up here, and now we're using it, and what that is, it's returning this this array over here. So now we have that array, and the new value, what we want to do is I'm going to use some destructuring again and say let's have an array, please put in all the the old array stuff, put that in there, but add on the new payload, which is also an object. So this will split out that entire array, put it in here, and then add this as another item. So that's sort of like pushing it into the array. But I just like this syntax a little bit more. And then what we want to do is we want to use that set card data and then give it the new array, because we have the full array now, and we want to reset that set new card so that our inputs are empty now. So we'll do link href and then make it empty, and then link name and make that empty as well. So that should reset the current values for the cards. So let's have a look at that. What happens now if we do this? So we have this link that we defined ourselves. So let's do my new link and then give it an let's do https //kaizenmedia.co.za and add. So it did clear it out, but it didn't push it into the array. And the reason for that is because we are still just displaying the static card over here. So now comes the time to put this into its own components and show how we can pass this as props and map it out. So let's do that. Firstly, I'm going to create a new file. We could put let's do a folder with components, even though we'll just have one, but just for the sake of good practice we'll do that, and then add a file. We'll call this the link card because that's what it is, linkcard.js. And what we'll do is we'll say const link card, so we won't create a class like we used to do to use props and stuff. We'll just use a normal function because we have React 16.8.1 and that is the coolest thing ever. So let's do this. Will receive the props and this is the function. And before we forget, we have to do some housekeeping. We'll export default this link card, and we also need to import some stuff here. We need to import React because you'll see React from React, and then we need to import the React DOM library as well. From React. Actually, I don't think we need to import React DOM because we aren't doing any rendering. So we can actually remove that. And I also need another thing called defragment because we want to make we can just do fragment. Save that. And this allows us to just return some JSX. So I'm so used to saying the render function. Let's just do render return and then give it the what do you call that, the open parentheses, and do some markup. And the markup we want in there is the actual link card. So we'll just remove that completely from here, paste that in here, and I want to wrap it in the fragment just to stay consistent with the code. Go fragment, close that up, and wow, that's a lot of fragments. And then remove that and put it at the bottom. So let's just move this up a little bit, save that. So now we still have the static component. So let's just import that and see if it works to make sure. So we want to import the link card from /components and then /link card. Save that, and we want to use that as a component. So we can say link card and / and save that. So let's see if that renders, and it doesn't. Let's look at the errors that we receive. So it'll say image style is not defined. And because this is JSX, we should actually say HTML4. The reason it's failing is because we still have the styles for the card in here, not that one, this one, and we want to actually have it where the card resides, and that's in the link card. So let's place that in there. And the reason I'm placing it in here is like in case we want to change that picture, maybe you can do that and save this link, this URL in a state variable, and then they can paste image URLs, so you'll receive it through props.state.whatever. But for now I'm just going to use static stuff, and we also have to fix that label, and this has to be something like HTML4, I think, and this one has to be HTML4 as well. Save that. Let's see if that changed anything. Cannot read property modules of undefined. Reload, and that works. And there we have our component. This is now being rendered from the external component file. So this is a component of its own now. So if we go to React and do app, we'll have the navigation. We can close that. The left content we can minimize, and there's the link card component. It exists as its own, so it will receive props that we'll give to it, but it doesn't have any for now. So let's pass down those props and render them as we create them. So to pass down props, we need to put them on the actual element, and I'm just going to call it cards and set that equal to the card data that we have, and that is the array that is in our state. So we're basically passing down this state item into our child as a property, and initially it only receives the 1, but as we push in and update is being called, and that's another thing about React's use state, it updates every time. So whenever the state updates, it will automatically update, so we don't have to do component will update or something like that. So now we send down the card data, and inside link card we have it in our props now. So what we want to do is use that in our actual markup. So instead of a um, hard-coded link, we'll do props, and usually we'd have to do this dot props, but we can just do props dot card data so actually we have an array now, so we have to change this up a little bit. We have to create a new constant and call this new card or let's make it a bit more semantic and say mapped data, and equal that to props dot card data dot map, which is built into JavaScript, and then we'll have the actual card and we'll have the index. And what we want to do is map these to render this every time. So we'll remove that and we'll paste that in there, and we need to return this. So let's do that and just return this and put that over there as well, and we can enter that, and that should be indented a little bit more. So now we can use the card. So we have the card and the index, and for everything that repeats we have to give it a key. So I'll just give it a key that is the index. And for the href, the actual title, we can just use card dot link name now, because that is in the card object which we are mapping from the array. So for the href, instead of this hard-coded value, we want to give it this and say card dot link href. Save that. Let's see if this works, but first we have to place this in here. So let's just do mapped data, save that, and then go to the browser, refresh. We have another error. Let's debug. Console, we'll see cannot read property map of undefined. The above error code link card component. So what we are doing wrong is, let's go back to the code, inspect when we're sending the props down. So the props are being sent from index.js to the link card, and then we should receive that. The thing that I think we're doing wrong is that we're calling this card data, but that's not what the property's name is. That's the data that we're passing. So we have to use the property name, and that is just cards. Let's save that and go back to the browser, refresh, and there we go. So this is being mapped from the actual card data and not from statically coded stuff. So I think if we create a name now, we should say link to, and then just do https. We'll do twitter.com and add, and there we go. We are now adding links. Let's add another random link. As you can see, I like making gibberish links, so we'll do something a bit more semantic. Let's say my GitHub, and we'll do https://github.com/ecard-d. Add that, and if we click this, we open it and see if this is the right link, and it's loading and loading and loading and loading, but it is the right link, so this is working. So we can just add some gibberish. And another thing that I think would be useful to add is some checks. I mean, we can just add in anything here and add in anything, because I see the validation isn't working, because if this is empty it still posts, but we could add some validation checks, like this shouldn't post if it's shorter than some value, and this needs to match a regex that has HTTPS in front of it, or HTTP, and yeah, so I think that sums up the entire video. I guess we just went through all of it. I thought it was going to be a bit more, but just to recap the hook stuff, let's just go through some of the ideas that went on here. In the index.js, we have this new syntax that, let's just minimize this. We have this new syntax card, like this use state thing that allows us to destructure an array that use state provides to us. And inside use state, we need to give the initial value for state, which is this first item, and then set card data, or whatever you call this one, you'll call the next one set, whatever that value is, but you don't have to, but that's just convention. And then we'll use that to change the state that we have. So whenever we call this value from our code, set new card, then that allows us to update the first value, this new card value. And what we do with that is we can pass it down as props to our components, and then that component receives the prop, and we can map that out and place it in here. So I hope that gives you some background on the React hooks. It's a very basic introduction. There's more to be learned, like use effect and how use effect works, and how you'll be able to use both. So let's just give a quick example of use effect, just to use effect. And then what will happen is, if we say use effect, I think what this takes is, I actually don't think it takes anything, but it has a function. And what this short thing is, it is basically a combination of component did mount and component did update. So this thing gets called once the component is created, and it gets called every time the component is updated as well. So if you want to write some code in between those events, like let's say you have external API that you have to ping or something like that, you'll just say API.ping, we'll do API.ping, and then give it some value. We'll just say that. So once this component is mounted, we'll ping the API, and every time new data is added or changed, the API will get pinged again. So you'll also maybe think that, okay, but what if we want to stop pinging the API? What if we go to a new, what if we don't want this to happen when the component is destroyed or deleted or something? Then React provides a cool way of doing this by just returning a function, and in this function we just do whatever we want to do. We can do API.stop ping, and this will when the component is destroyed, this will remove this. Otherwise we might get memory leaks, like this thing will never get destroyed when the component gets destroyed, because React maintains the state. So for us to destroy it, we just return a function that destroys it. And they will give you some errors, some informational logs on how to do that. So that's a very, very useful tool that is provided with the new React hooks. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. I really enjoyed making this, and I think it was useful, and I hope you found it useful too. If you did, leave a like, maybe subscribe, or share it with someone. And if you want to learn something else or learn more, you can just find me on GitHub or Twitter. I'll put the links in the description, and I'll also push this code up to GitHub so that you can clone or fork or store, do whatever you want with it. It's free to use. I don't own anything, and I hope React is okay with me using the images. But that is all for today, and thanks for watching guys. I'll see you next time.